we're very focused on delivering exceptionally good service. We have what we call our outstanding service board. And the numbers that we derive the outstanding service board from is Johnson Consulting surveys. Johnson Consulting sends out surveys to every single at-need and pre-need family that we serve. And they ask a bunch of questions. And then we read every survey to all of our funeral directing staff every week. So any survey that comes in the week, now this isn't like our entire company surveys to their entire staff. It'd be each group of funeral homes. And so we operate in 14 clusters. So there's 53 or 14 clusters. And those clusters have daily meetings to start the day. But once a week, we have a weekly meeting, which is a little bit more involved than the daily meeting is for what are we going to do today for the families that we're serving. The weekly meeting is things like how are we doing, how are we running our funeral homes, and so on and so forth. And so in each one of those clusters on any given week, we might have somewhere between 3 and 10 surveys. We have the funeral director who met with the family read the survey to the rest of the staff. So they have to
their own survey.
You read it out loud. But the good thing is like 98% of the surveys we receive are rated as superior or above average. About 90% is called the NPS score, Net Promoter Score. 90% of the people rate us as would highly recommend. And there's a very high standard to get to an NPS score of 90.
Yeah, that's really high.
Yeah. And then we have about 35% or greater return rate. And then 80% of the families we serve, and more like 88% of the families we serve, say that we were about or less than expected. The interesting fact is that although it's like...
In terms of cost, you mean?
In terms of cost, because they ask. The question used to be, are we more, about, or less than expected? That was the question. Now they've switched it to a value question. For the money you spent, did you receive the goods and services? But when it was, were you more, about, or less than expected, 88% of the people said we were about or less than expected. You ask funeral directors in America, they would think it's the other way around. They would say 88% of the people said it's more than expected. But the reality is, and Johnson, I'm sure Jake Johnson could support me on this, but over 80%, we're closer to 90% of the people say it was about or less than expected. So we have a misconception. We as funeral directors have a misconception of how people actually perceive cost, because we perceive it as 90% of people think we're more than expected. They think 90% of the time it was about or less than expected, which I find interesting about funeral services.
Well, I would say that that's a testament to the services you provide, because I would imagine that if you were to survey them, like as they're walking in the door before they've talked to you, and then after, those are going to be wildly different. I think it's probably going to start, it would probably be flipped, right? 10% of the people coming in are going to think they're going to get more value than they're paying. And then by the time they leave, if they've received amazing service, it flips. But yeah, I mean, I think that's just a testament to that.
And the funny thing is the ones that say that it was more than expected, like I would say, and I don't have an official number on this, but probably pretty damn close, is about 95 to 99% of the people that say it's more than expected rate us as a 10 out of 10 when it comes to outstanding service, and rate us as 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 as to highly recommend us. So it doesn't correlate that just because it was more than they expected that you did a bad job. It's just, you could have somebody spend $1,000 and they could say it was more than expected. The funny thing is, it's funnier is some of the people, a lot of the times the people that say it was more than expected are Department of Social Services, because we never turn anybody away for financial need, no matter what. Their Department of Social Services, the Department of Social Services paid for the service. They paid $0, and it was more than expected. And on top of that, they found some fault, or something like that. But the people who thought it was more than expected, 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, and everything was great. But it's the social services that did not pay anything. It was more than expected.
I mean, that's just why 100% is always unattainable. There's always going to be those that are not happy. I mean, what do they say, that happiness is expectations minus what you actually received or something like that? So you're exceeding that.
So one thing is reading surveys every single week. We read all the surveys. We're wildly focused on those surveys. We're also wildly focused on our Google surveys, Google reviews. That is making sure that we answer every Google review, positive or negative, every time. And if there's a negative Google review, or calling them right away, finding out what expectation they had that wasn't met and seeing if there's any way that we can change their opinion of us. But we're very focused on that. I'm very focused on, in every market we're in, I want the absolute best funeral directors on our team. So we try to always have the best pay, the best benefits, the best schedule, the best people, and hoard them all up on our team, and not being afraid to terminate somebody if they don't share that belief.
This might be a controversial question, but do you have trouble filling spots?
Two things. One is, no, I don't think right now we have any open spots in our company. We have about 120 directors. I mean, we might have one or two because there's always, somebody's retiring or somebody's coming in or something like that. But so the answer on the filling them, ultimately, the answer is no. Trying to find an outstanding person. There are very few funeral directors out there looking for a job. I don't even know if there's any, but there's very few funeral directors out there looking for a job. So when you do have a job opening, trying to find a funeral director is not easy. I'm not saying that's easy at all, because in the world of funeral service right now, and I think that every owner or everybody running any funeral home would support me in that, is that there is less funeral directors than there is demand. We have a lot of demand for funeral directors and not many funeral directors. So finding the right one or the good one is very hard, because if they're good, they're happy somewhere.
Yeah.
Getting them to leave where they're at and come to you is not an easy task.
You'd be surprised. I mean, it does sound like, when you hear rumblings of people having a hard time hiring, and sometimes you look at like comp packages and what they offer and what the expectations of that job are, they're pretty far off. I think one of the things that I was curious about is you did mention that you do offer highly competitive salaries and benefits and stuff like that. And I think that is one of the things that is an indication of how quickly you can fill spots. Obviously finding the right person can take time sometimes, but actually getting those applications in usually is attracted to higher comps and good benefits.
And pay and benefits are extraordinarily important, but the benefits you have, typically most people would want, is health, life, disability, 401k, vision, dental, gym membership, things like that, to offer them excellent benefits. But that only goes so far. One thing, going back to the markets we're in and everything, trying to stay in these mid-tier markets, because if you get small markets, small funeral homes, it's really hard, because, and anybody working in a small town in a smaller funeral home knows, there's only like maybe somewhere between 2 and 4 funeral directors. So you're on call a lot. That is not easy. So although we do have some markets where we have smaller markets and fewer funeral directors, it's hard to offer them high quality of life. And we do everything we can to make sure that we have high quality of life in those areas. The middle markets offer enough volume of service. And if you have enough market share, then you can have a team of, like, say, 6 people plus a manager plus a care center manager, so that what you develop into is you're on call once a week, higher quality of life. Besides being on call once a week, what we have, if you're done with your work, you can go home early in the day. That's something we try to do. When it's your day off, it's your day off. If it's your vacation, it's your vacation. We've focused heavily now that we have outstanding funeral directors who maybe their day off and they want to come in and work with a family because they know them and they feel like that they're going to serve them the best. And then we'll comp them either a comp day or additional compensation for coming in on their day off. But what we do is focus on quality of life. So pay and benefits only get you so far, but quality of life is big for anybody. And frankly, coming out of mortuary school, going to a funeral home that was 3 locations, doing 300 calls, and being one of 3 funeral directors in a 3-man schedule, and being on 2 out of 3 weekends. And my friends are getting married and things are going on in life. And when you switch a weekend because you want to go to a wedding and you got to work 5 weekends in a row to make the switch, that's not easy. So having that experience, when we grew, I had a very focused on trying to make sure, and I worked with my dad on that, very focused. We made sure that we wanted to have a big enough base of business where we could have quality of life be a top priority of ours.